University of California, San Diego, at Raza Studies, outside of the Raza Studies office, Mexican American Studies. All this chalk, deport them all, build the wall. F Mexicans, F, that's the F word written on the wall at the University of California, San Diego. For members of minority groups, and then this is where I want to shift the focus a little bit, it has an impact, and the main impact is it makes you hate yourself growing up. It makes you not want to be Mexican, makes you want to not be African American, makes you want to be light skinned, makes you want to be white, makes you want to be anything than what you are, right? And so internalized racism or oppression is a massive impact. It means that you adopt the outgroup's definition of your group, right? Where then you become the oppressor yourself. You assume that oppressor role. This will connect to teachers in a little bit. We talk about hiring educators of color, and generally that's a really great idea. And I would advocate for that because it's an equity issue. But sometimes you've hired a tyrant, someone who's just as bad or worse than someone that, because they're colonized, because they've adopted the outgroup's definition of your group, and they're very, very harmful educators in the classroom. And a lot of times it's unbeknownst to them, right? They just buy into these myths about their own group. This is a good example, I think, of an internalized, an internally oppressed, colonized Trump supporter. He really is anxious that if Clinton wins, that we're going to have a taco truck on every corner. And most people think that's pretty awesome to be able to have a taco truck. And, so there was like a big Twitter kind of response, taco truck on every corner, and of course he's just a buffoon, someone who's really just a mouthpiece for a very conservative agenda. So how do we address this, and what is it when it's in the classroom? And in my own work, I call it subtractive schooling. I think conventionally it's called assimilation. I mean, you have to assimilate. Well, what does assimilate mean, right? When all the policies are about eviscerating your language, your culture, your community-based identities, when it's about ethnic cleansing, if you will. Well, what happens, of course, is this othering, these we-they distinctions, this internalized oppression, this self-hatred. So how do we counter that? I mean, this is the task of our culturally relevant educators. Well, we need and it should be all of our task, right, to be sure that we're asset-based. And this is a type of education where it's meaningful educational practices are constructed precisely out of students' languages, cultures, and community-based identities. One of my areas is assessment, and I've been advocating for fair and valid assessment in the state of Texas and nationally. And what's very, very clear in all of the assessment literature is that if you have an authentic curriculum, right, that is based on students' lives, and then you test in authentic ways, not in narrow, reductive ways, that's hands down the best approach to educating children, right? And so we are happy to, unfortunately, to teach in reductivist ways for reasons that are unfortunate. I won't go into those, but it's recognizable to us, I'm sure. Okay. All right, thank you. No, I'm not in Arizona yet, so. Gloria, there you are. My students were so thrilled. Last week we read Gloria's book, and I said, I'm going to see Gloria this week. And they were like, oh, you know her. Yeah, of course. We both went to Stanford. We've had our Stanford. We have our injuries, right? Okay. It might be me, okay? It's just my energy. It's just, okay, good. That is the next slide. And so, I mean, I want to credit us. I want to credit us of doing the good work because this is the kind of work that incites consciousness, it cites imagination, and provides the research base to develop an agenda. And you can't do that without an agenda. A lot of people are very cynical about the role of policy and how research can impact it because everything's political, and how can you even make any shifts or changes? Well, I would argue the opposite, that it would be unethical for us to be able to advance a policy agenda without the research base. And certainly our communities demand no less, right? And so without that research base, that's how we need to move forward. And we do make a difference in the world. We very much do. And so here is a rebirth of a national movement that has its roots in our work. And of course, our work is based on deeper intellectual struggles and intellectual currents that go back to easily the 1960s and 1970s, the civil rights movement that advocated very clearly and strongly for inclusion. And I think it's primarily been us scholars, many of us in Mexican American studies, African American studies, Boricua studies, Native American and Indigenous studies, women and gender studies, gay and lesbian studies. We're the ones that have, in this dry spell where we've not had movimiento, we haven't had that nourishment that we know that this knowledge provides, have carried the torch. I mean, it's us, right? It's us. So, so I changed my title a little bit because the space that we're in is culturally eviscerating. It's subtractive. It's demoralizing. It's oppressive. It's oppressive, and we see it every day. If you're in the schools, if you're in the classrooms, we see it every day. And so here we have a way to counter what's going on that we call public education right now. If you haven't seen Precious Knowledge, I encourage you. I think it's one of the best videos, documentaries that's out there that shows what a culturally relevant, powerful curriculum and pedagogy can do for our children. This comes out of Arizona, and in Arizona, it's a deeper history of segregation and trying to integrate the schools, and by court order, it never happened, but what did happen was the institutionalization of Mexican American studies, Raza studies, and other area studies, so that we had for a good while, since I think 2002 until 2010, ethnic studies or multicultural education taught at the elementary, middle school, and at the high school level. When we say ethnic studies, that's a term that's used for higher education, and multicultural education historically comes out of that because it's a research base. It's not just, it's not teaching ethnics, right? What it is an actual field of study. And it aligns again to this civil rights history and past. So in Arizona, because of the integration court order and the compromise, they had a very robust program in ethnic studies, to which I'll turn in a bit when I talk about the evidence. Well, in 2010, when the books were banned, and it was very severe. Was anyone in Arizona around this time period? Anybody? It was so awful when Tom Horn and Huppenthal came down against Mexican American studies, and all they were doing was being successful and going on to college and participating in rallies and challenging the status quo, right? What's so wrong with that, right? Well, it's against the law in Arizona, right? This was citizenship education par excellence. It was amazing. Kind of curriculum. I reviewed the curriculum. I'm the expert witness in the Arizona court case on this case that now is going to go to trial, we think in the spring. I can't talk too much about it, but it is the First Amendment and 14th Amendment framing, the lack of due process under the law. So what happened in response was Tony Diaz, from a friend of mine from Houston. I used to teach in Houston, an activist. He organized the Libro Traficante. It's playing on the word narcotraficante, like the traffickers in drugs. Well, this is traffickers in books, right? And so they were going across the state with gathering books, getting book donations, and going on a tour and collecting books and delivering books to the different sites throughout the Southwest, all the way to Arizona. Actually, I think your book, Gloria, is banned, right? You know what? My book wasn't, but it was. I know, but it was used to ban all of them in the administrative law decision. And then it misquoted me. And I just thought it was like ugly, awful. I mean, just like I never said what the law says I said. Anyway, let me see. All right. So New Mexico, now there's a robust ethnic studies movement happening there. There's a groundswell. So we are the core is the hashtag for that initiative. And I know that the teachers union there, I think it's the AFT is very involved. And so what's interesting and what we're seeing in our states is that there's this groundswell, including in Texas, from the local communities, talking to school boards and the superintendents saying, we want ethnic studies and we want ethnic studies now. And in fact, that's the hashtag for the coalition in California, ethnic studies now. And so it's interesting because, and powerful on the one hand and essential, but we don't have the teachers to teach it. We don't have the capacity. So there's concerns in different places, including in New Mexico, that you could pass, and Texas and beyond, you can pass a law, but you can really destroy a great idea if you don't have the reallocation of resources to professional development, to the development of curriculum. If you treat it in a way that that really minimizes the status of what ethnic studies should be, it's a curriculum that comes out of decades of research in all of the studies that I've mentioned. In Texas, we're in the throes of challenging a racist textbook called The Mexican American Heritage. I don't know if you've gotten wind of it, but there was a mobilization in September. There's been a lot of activity. The REST Coalition, the Responsible Ethnic Studies Coalition, has organized. We do have a petition. If it occurs to you to sign it, that would be very helpful to us. The idea is to not have this book adopted by the State Board of Education because it's very, frankly, very overtly and just profoundly racist against Mexican Americans. It's as if it had been written, honestly, 40 years ago. It doesn't cite any of our scholars, as if we had no literature, no scholarship, no research. And it was also published by one of the former State Board of Education members who owns a publishing house. And these two unknown scholars with absolutely no background, no one even knows who they are, Jamie Angle and Jamie Riddle and Valerie Angle. I mean, who are they? Nobody's even seen them. We wonder if they exist. I mean, you know. And even the person that our community is dealing with to make the corrections is someone else. So there's something a little strange about what's going on. But we have to challenge it. This came out of the 2014 State Board of Education hearing where the community, as it always does when the history standards are discussed, the social studies standards presents and says we need content on women, on Mexican American histories, Mexican Americans, and there's precious little of that, and there hasn't been, period. It doesn't matter that we've, for decades and a day, been testifying against this. It's a very right-wing Board of Education. But now, because of what we're seeing here, there are concerns by board members that they could lose their positions. And so we hear informally that we have a unanimous vote on the board again. So I think that's a really clear sign that our community is growing in power and influence. Of course, we had present the members of the Mexican American Legislative Caucuses, the Senate Hispanic Caucus. We had chamber representatives. I mean, people of recognized stature and that are elected come in with us, with the community, to testify against all of this. And then they always are present, but it's never been this great of a mobilization. The next hearing is going to be on the 15th of this month, and they'll take a vote before the end of the week. So we're planning on having a party We think we've got this, but you don't take anything for chance, right? And we're going to all be present and testify. I look a little angry there because I think I am at that moment. Working with Joaquin Castro. Also, he's very interested and concerned, and so seeing if we can do something at the federal level to create a funding stream for Grow Your Own Ethnic Studies. That'd be awesome, huh? Why can't we do that? We can do that, right? I think we need a march on Washington, though. I think we need an ethnic studies march on Washington. I'm not going to organize it. I'm not going to do that, but I'm putting it out there. So what does the research say? We've had 40 years of research, easily, and Christy Sleater, she covers this in this this monograph produced for the National Education Association. It was very useful to our friends in California. I don't know what happened to California. I thought I had a California slide, but maybe I passed it. But in California, they just passed Assembly Bill 2016, and Assembly Bill 2016 creates it encourages districts to offer social studies, ethnic studies throughout the state of California. It's not a requirement, but it creates a model framework. There they actually, are able to generate curriculum that becomes a framework that can then be used by school districts, and this is part of the groundswell in California. Before AB 2016, there was AB 101 last session, and Jerry Brown vetoed it, and so now, a year later, it's passed. But between last year and this year, what we see is that that there's a lot of districts, Pico Union, LAUSD, Oakland, and San Francisco, they already had their own ethnic studies program, that we're doing it anyway. And this is a curriculum that is consistent with the A through G curriculum, which is what you need to be able to get into the flagship institution of the University of California. We are in Texas, are working on legislation as we speak. I'm so excited. We're going to have a bill. And it's with the same idea of creating a curriculum that prepares our young people for college, not unlike what our friends in Arizona did. The research has gotten a lot of attention is the Dee and Penner one out of San Francisco. You can probably just Google it under the Stanford study, and it'll be the first bullet that comes up. But the Dee and Penner research looks at San Francisco USD's ethnic studies program, and that's a partnership between Cal State Unified San Francisco and the San Francisco Unified School District. So it's a standing committee, and last week I attended a meeting in the Austin Independent School District to discuss curriculum, and so we're making headway really quickly, even as we speak. So we're going to be growing that out, working on curriculum right now. There's a lot of ways to do this, and the way that they did that was through this partnership. Again, a standing curriculum. It was the same teachers, a year-long course. They met every single year for the length, the duration of their existence. That ensured program integrity. The way that the research was conducted was that it was able to look at their implementation in a way that comes as close to a quasi-experimental design as you can get in survey research, in that half of the students were opted in to take the course at the 9th grade. The other half were students that were required to take the course because at the 8th grade level, they weren't performing very well. So they were on a track to dropping out because they weren't acquiring credits to graduation at a rate that was hopeful. So this was the intervention for these students, and it was a systematic one over a 4-year time period, and that research showed that it contributed to higher grades, higher attendance, and accruing credits toward graduation, which means that the students weren't dropping out. It also showed that for African American and Latino boys, that it contributed to higher achievement in science and mathematics in particular. And these weren't just correlations, but in fact they were very powerful predictors, even surprising the researchers themselves. They were kind of like, they went in to study something else, and that was what they found, and it lines up, as it turns out. It's so great to have this research. For the positivists and for people that really need the quantitative data, and I'm not anti quantitative data. I'm just saying that we actually have an accumulation of a lot of research that shows the benefits of culturally relevant pedagogy and curriculum. But this is very compelling data. Also out of Arizona, we have Cabrera, who's also an expert witness in the court case. They looked at Cabrera and colleagues, Nolan. They looked at the impacts. It was over a 4-year time period, and they were able to look at these cohorts, and what they found was that students that had been in the program, oftentimes they took more than one ethnic studies class if it was available. It was something that they liked. On the whole, they weren't, actually none of them were in the honors curriculum. And what that data showed was that it was correlated with actually high school graduation and going to college. It's really, really outstanding data that were presented. They also outperformed everyone in the non-ethnic studies part of the sample, which is a pretty big deal. I mean, they outperformed systematically. I think the only glitch was in 2010 when they were being attacked. And so they didn't, there was one time period where it didn't show up as strongly, and it had to do precisely with the ways in which they were being attacked in Arizona. The Lopez research looks at, the impact of ethnic studies on children's reading, and she has a tested measure of reading self-efficacy that contributes strongly to being a good reader, that shows that children that were exposed to, these are children, small children in elementary schools that were exposed to multicultural education, ethnic studies, that actually their reading achievement and their self-efficacy, their capacity to read went up. So what I've been working on at the national level is, and we have a site in Milwaukee, but also we're in Chicago, Brooklyn, Dallas, and Sacramento, is growing our own teachers. And so this is a movement that comes out of the grassroots. And at NELREP, the National Latino Education Research and Policy Project, ties back to IUPLR, the University Consortium for Puerto Rican and Latino Research, if you've heard of that. And IUPLR is based of Mexican American, Boricua, Puerto Rican, Latino centers that in turn are really the progeny of civil rights. And so there's a deep history that has to do with those of us in education that now are connected across the country and working to devise pathways, we call them pathways, into teaching. That's a representation by an artist, Anya Torres, from Puerto Rico, the island, and living in New York. That's La Casibayahua. Have y'all heard of her? La Casibayahua? Anybody? She's the Taino goddess, the mother, the creator of all living things. And so this is a representation that represents water and earth, and I just think it's so beautiful. I think she found me, by the way. I was looking for a cover on Pinterest, and I don't know how, but she found me, or I found her. And I just feel that she captures this idea that as we create pathways, what we need to always be thinking of is growing consciousness, right? Because that's really the task. I mean, yes, to create a pathway into teaching, but also a social justice, a community-based kind of consciousness that is emancipatory and progressive, right? That's what we want. So this is Academia Cuautli. This is our Grow Your Own project in the Austin Independent School District. I think before I go into too much detail, let me just show you the video, if this will work. I don't know. Let me see. I should be able to click on our little baby Aztec eagle, or how to, maybe I need to go to the link, right?
This news segment from KLRU brought to you by Texas Mutual Insurance.
For the most part, children in our public schools, and they are not getting a curriculum that For the most part,
This news segment from KLRU brought to you by Texas Mutual Insurance.
For the most part, children in our public schools, and this isn't unique to Austin, they are not getting a curriculum that responds to their culture, their identities, their communities in ways that affirm who they are. Children that come to Academia Quality have an opportunity to learn these things and learn that they're not marginal, that they're actually members of communities that have roots that go all the way back to the original inhabitants of this continent. The idea was to really build on the district's current efforts. The Austin Independent School District has 60 plus schools that teach dual language, but there's really not enough curriculum right now. Because there aren't those basic kinds of materials, the community felt an urgency about bringing in resources that could be of use to our teachers.
No, ni yo tampoco.
We are teaching exclusively in Spanish. The children right now are learning about migration, immigration, civil rights, and local history. A lot of children feel very alienated from school, particularly if they're immigrants. It helps them to feel connected to the larger curriculum. It becomes a bridge. Children at this level are studying the Greek gods and getting access to Texas history. And this is an opportunity to share from a grounded, rooted, historic standpoint what that culture, language, what the cultural arts are and have been for this community.
This local news segment was brought to you by Texas Mutual Insurance.
So that's Academia Cuautli. Cuautli means eagle. We're very inspired by the eagle, and the name comes to us by way of Mexica or Aztec elder. The eagle is a universally recognized symbol of rebirth, and the reason is because eagles molt. You know what molting is? They live long lives. Eagles live long lives. They can live up to like 90 years, longer than human beings in many instances. And we were inspired by the eagle because we think that education needs to be about renewal. They are able to, I heard from an elder, they decide whether or not to molt. The aging of the eagle is connected to, am I on? So the aging of the eagle is connected to oil and dirt that gets under their wings, and they get heavy in the span of a lifetime. And so the only way to become new again is for them to lose a third of their plumage. It makes for a very precarious circumstance because they lose a lot of calcium, and they can of course be preyed upon because of their weakness. Yet if they survive, and you can see all of this on Google, if they survive, they look like young birds again. And so that's inspiring to us, because we think that education should be more about renewal and rebirth and revitalizing our identities, and in our community, the Spanish language. And not about test scores. I mean, that's just such an uninspiring, or even the achievement gap, that's a discourse that's so uninspiring. It doesn't motivate, right? But what does motivate are these indigenous, community-based ways of knowing and being in the world. And that's all complicated, right? Because we belong to many indigenous identities, tribes, communities. But it's democracy at work, right? It's people coming together and saying, well, this is what we want to have happen in our community. This is what motivates us and inspires us. And then there's actual individuals, like you saw our elder, Rosa Tupina, who is willing to offer instruction in danza. And danza mexica is another part of our curriculum that is not Aztec dance, it's an Aztec ceremony. So it brings in this idea of ceremony into the actual curriculum. In doing the work of NELRAP, which is a partnership-based model, mostly it's at the high school level. That's the way we've designed it, from the high school into higher education. Again, there's a lot of different ways to construct this, and it depends on local opportunities, initiative, organizing. It depends. But NELRAP, I think because of the wisdom of our collective, had envisioned that to move forward as a community, an oppressed community, what we need to do is have our initiatives based and centered in our community-based organizations. It needs to, I think in education and higher ed, we think that we're the solution oftentimes, and even districts, those of us in school districts, they think that they're the solution, but if you anchor it in a community, what we see is that there's sustainability of an initiative, right? Because we move a lot, actually, and you'll have your champions at the district level, and you have the champions at the college level, and you use your champions. You lose them. I mean, they're gone in a while, and that's very hard because then it's like you have to start over again with an initiative. So this comes after many years of doing this work and learning how to do this. We've already been through 2 administrations in the 3 years of operation in the Austin Independent School District, and we're beginning to call the shots. It's like the new person comes in and we say, okay, well, we need purchase orders, just do it. We need purchase orders for this and that, and this is our structure. We need, the school bus, these routes is who we worked with last time. I mean, we end up being the ones that train the new people that come in, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, just we'll make it work. And so that is the embodiment of what I'm talking about in terms of a grow your own effort that's community anchored. Now we can, and we are members of the community, right? But it's a different kind of positioning. We got started in September 20th, 2013, and it was a conversation around children's books. You have a great resource here with the children's. There's an analysis of books that are done annually here. I forget what it's called. The CCBC here at the University of Wisconsin. And we were able to bring some data to bear from the CCBC. And we had this conversation. It was on children's books, on literacy, and we had archivists, historians, arts people from our community, librarians. We had all these different folks that represent different interests, our bilingual education teachers, our dual language teachers, our district people. It was a very intentional kind of gathering, which is what you could do here, by the way, and you can do it anywhere. It's a very intentional gathering, and you need to make sure that you have your actual stakeholders, the people doing the work there. And if you're not connected to your community, then you have to first get connected and then find out who's testifying at the school board, who's doing this stuff, right? Who are your advocates? Who are your champions? Who's bringing books into the schools? I'm sure you have library advocates. I mean, that's like a whole sector I wasn't even familiar with. But we have our library, in our children's books advocates. And they're often not called into these spaces. It's interesting. It's like there's these structured silences and blind spots. And so we brought them in, and of course we have to change the world. So we got this problem with the state board, the racist Northeastern book publishers. They publish books, and they're not only are they not culturally relevant, but they're linguistically off because they outsource to Argentina, and it seems, right? And even the illustrations, it's not the aesthetic of the Southwest. Even the aesthetics are off. And there's like new words in Spanish that are not organic to our communities, and so we have to write books and publish them. We have to be about that. But what came out of all of that, and we were in our beautiful Mexican American Culture Center. You'll have to come by, Gloria, sometime and visit us. But we're at our community. You're all welcome to come and we'll give you a tour. And when you think about education reform, I mean, all of these years and billions of dollars that have gone into education reform, when once has that reform intentionally gone toward helping a local community-based institution? When once? Well, this is that. So it's a partnership. It's a legal partnership, a contract with the Austin Independent School District, the City of Austin, where our institution is held, and our community-based organization. We call ourselves Nuestro Grupo. See, so you could organize and call yourselves Nuestro Grupo or El Grupo de Wisconsin or something, You can just form, right? You can just form. We have a nonprofit, and LRAP is our nonprofit, and that's just to cover incidentals. But most of the money gets paid to us by Title I and Title III. I mean, you got to serve, children in Title I schools. Title III is for your English language learners, and I mean, they're always just, our districts, it goes to vendors, right, and projects and programs. But if you've got community leadership, well, you can say, well, we want those dollars to go toward this initiative, right? And so it's an initiative that provides sustainability that I'm convinced is the right way to go. So I've covered different parts of this. We serve 4 East Austin area schools. They're in a gentrifying context. There's crises every day because it's gentrifying. So we hope to be that stability for a lot of the parents, and we're happy to be a source of that stability, and then again to combine resources so that we can work together. There's an elder epistemology. I mean, if the reform were housed in the public schools, chances are we wouldn't have danza mexica, we wouldn't have an elder epistemology, where we actually respect and we're very intentional about that, respect towards elders. We have free space. It's a co-constructed curriculum, and the way that works is those of us in the university, mostly me and my husband. My husband's a historian, Emilio Zamora. He's the lead historian of the state on the textbook issue, by the way. So I'm a little too close to all of that, but also just I'm very happy to work with him. He'll provide a monograph. So far, we have civil rights, local history, immigration, and the cultural arts. And he'll provide a monograph with leading research questions in history, with resources. And then he gives that to the curriculum writers that are also part of Nuestro Grupo. And they make it district aligned. They align it to district standards, age appropriate. So we serve 33 children, while we only serve 33 children, and of course the parents, and we're working on the parent side of the curriculum. More like the abuela side of the curriculum, because the parents are working, so the grandmothers are the ones that are present in so many instances, for real. What our curriculum writers do is that they generate it, they give it to us, and it's co-constructed, and then we observe the teaching of the curriculum, and we make modifications to it, it's available through this initiative district-wide in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 11, up to 45% of our curriculum. So we need resources in English and Spanish. At that September 20th meeting, the dual language teachers, they told us, we're supposed to be in a dual language district in Austin, and yet, we don't have books, we don't have curriculum. So those were the community voices that we heard that we thought was most urgent, and that led very organically. I mean, organic is great, right? Organic is awesome in every area of life, every other area of existence. Well, it's awesome here as well. And so that's what we've been doing, co-constructing this curriculum. I work on the indigenous side of it, the danza mexica. There's a lot to know about danza, about ceremony, and it's just so beautiful. And what's so beautiful about being in danza, because when you're in ceremony is, and when you're new to it, particularly myself, is that there's a lot of singing, there's a lot of songs, and every song is new. Every song, and I'm like, wow, and it just goes on, and so it's that sense of renewal, right, that comes just from being organic and connected to community. Maybe I'll sing you a song if you'll let me. So this is our pathway. So we have Sanchez Metzavala and Houston feeding into Academia Cuautli. And they'll be going into the middle schools and then Travis High School, and we have like 3 cohorts. So the idea with the jagged lines is to be very intentional about the curriculum. Of course, at the 4th, and we have some 5th graders, they'll get our curriculum. At the 6th grade, that's what we're talking about right now at the district level, because they're merging into the 6th grade for implementation next year in fall 2017. In the 9th grade, it could be ethnic studies. That could be our bill at the state level, our ethnic studies bill. And what that bill would be about is it would be based on local community and district initiative and demographics for communities to be able to offer a curriculum of their choosing. It's not to dictate. It's not to become, authoritarian here, but actually just to create space for districts to do what they want. It could be an ethnic studies course. It could be like my course that I teach at the university level. That would be more of a survey because we would want it to be critical and to provide a sense of what the experience is. Or it could be very focused. Again, we have to be responsive to our communities, and our school boards are responsive, to the voices that they hear. This pathway would take our children, whoever want to go into teaching, and the idea here is this is a movement, okay? This is all of us working together. If they don't want to be part of this for the teaching, for a career in teaching, that's fine. But our message to the parents is that we have a crisis, and we have to work on it together, right? And no one's beholden to this, but we want your support for addressing what really is a crisis, and we want at least some segment, some portion of these children to go back into our communities to be their teachers. We have rotating sets of teachers every Saturday. They're regular certified teachers, and we combine a veteran with novice teachers so that we're always preparing teachers, and then we actually have professional development. We've prepared up to 30 or more teachers in the curriculum. We've discovered in the process that teachers actually need permission to teach civil rights. They didn't even know that they could teach it, which is reflective of how they're oppressed in their schools. They feel that they're transgressing to speak the Spanish language in the hallways, in a school that professes to be a dual language district. Well, when we're housed in the community, we're able to liberate the curriculum. It's not just teaching it, right, and offering it and them learning their history, but it's the politics. It's addressing the politics of education. This helps them, our teachers, what they're telling us, to be in a space for once in their entire professional careers to teach in Spanish the way that they know how to teach. I mean, they're free, right? So here we have our pathway. What's pretty cool is that if we stage this out well, we'll be able to provide, we'll be able to provide opportunities for students to be paraprofessionals and have employment as part of a contract, right? They'll have employment so that while they're going to school, but it could be like, maybe somewhat of a loan forgiveness, so that, there's an idea is to pay them for 30 hours, but make them work for 20, possibly in the very classrooms that they'll later even occupy as teachers. I mean, that is a really, really deep education. There's more to it, but the idea would be for them to go back into Travis High School and to possibly be social studies teachers teaching this curriculum, or to be bilingually certified and to go back through Sanchez Metz and Zavala and to be teachers in District 2. I mean, this is like a beginning, right? So it'll expand to other areas. So my time is almost up, but let's see if I have any more slides. Here's our vision statement. Again, this is our community-based group. It's to honor our community's cultural heritage, foster a social justice consciousness, and reclaim our collective identities in pursuit of educational freedom. I remember when I first showed that to the person at the district, I think that educational freedom part kind of got to them. But again, that's why you want to house the reform outside of the district and outside of the university, because that's where you have voice to actually leverage a critique of schooling and the status quo. She bristled a little bit, but it's cool now. Everything's cool. I think they just, I think some are owning up to it, and some are like just, they're just resigned to it. I just love our little eagle, by the way, our little aguilita. And what's really cool is that we came up with our logo first. This is the concha. This is which is in the Aztec symbol, like for the calling, el llamamiento, right? It's like el anuncio. And nuestro grupo, our little concha, is in the eagle's heart. You can't see it, but if you blow up the eagle's heart, that's where we are. And then here's the teachers' mission statement. Academia Cuautli empowers teachers and students to formulate cultural identities so that we feel primed to take action when we see injustice and a need for change. We provide a safe space for students to express empathy and making meaning through a multicultural and biliterate movimiento de aprendizaje. So just this, this learners movement, this learning movement, this movimiento de aprendizaje. So those are our teachers that they came up with that recently. All right. Gracias. Thank you.
We do have time for questions, and we have a microphone in the back. And thank you. Wonderful presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes, I think, yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. And I very much like your idea that we now need to think about how can we become authors of the reform rather than hope or secretly wish there will be a reform, especially given the current political situation in this country. My question is actually has to do with the definition of ethnic studies. Because I think in many cases, the reform starts with a kind of a redefinition of certain things we have been talking about or working on. So to provide kind of a context about my question is, here at UW-Madison, we have a, as part of the general education requirement, we have the ethnic studies requirement. So all students are required to take a course of, I think, 3 credits. To fulfill the so-called ethnic studies requirement. And this policy was implemented in 2003. And the idea is that students, or that we need to teach about the cultures and the contributions of marginalized ethnic or minority groups. And so when the policy was invented at that time, and basically a lot of courses were qualified to be considered as ethnic studies requirement. I'm working at the German department, just so you know. So a typical course, Turkish immigrants in Germany would be considered as a typical course to fulfill such requirement. I don't know when people start to change the policy. Now the current policy is ethnic studies requirement is for students to get a better understanding about the contributions and the cultures of persistently marginalized ethnic groups in the United States. So the course I mentioned, like Turkish immigrants in Germany, no longer counts to such a requirement. So now we're focusing on, for example, Latino Americans, African Americans, Chinese Americans. Then I think at the one committee meeting, somebody raised the question, what about Jewish community? Does it count as a minority group or not? Does it count as a marginalized group or not? And those who said no, basically trying to argue that, first of all, they are white. Secondly, they are within the power structure. Therefore, we shouldn't count. But today, actually, I was at a symposium yesterday to celebrate that Yiddish has been offered on this campus for 100 years. And so now the Yiddish music, Yiddish literature, and also American Jewish literature, all these courses count to the ethnic studies requirement, I think, which is good. So my question is, do you think that the definition of ethnic studies in the context of curriculum requirement or the curriculum design is still fluid, is ever changing in this ever-changing globalized society? So that's my question. Thank you.
That'd be a great conversation for all of us to have. So anyone that wants to chime in, they're welcome. But well, I think that if you look at this leader piece, the National Education Association, that's a really good piece for looking at all the different kinds of ethnic studies. So ethnic studies itself tends to run the gamut from sort of the heroes and holidays perspective. And this is a K-12 analysis, but sort of, you know, when you have African American month or Hispanic month, oftentimes that's the heroes and holidays version, right? And it's not really engaging the systems or, you know, critically, you know, power structures and addressing issues of race and difference and language and all of the kinds of things that are connected to the oppression of U.S. minority groups. It still exists, and at the other end is of the curriculum is one that is more, that is critical. I think in between, it's a messy kind of field, but in between, ethnic studies is about culture in the ways that you speak, right? And so I think that I think it's great to ground your program, your ethnic studies curriculum in the wishes, the desires, and the realities of your local communities. And what we see is that, in particular, there are systematically there's knowledges that are subjugated, right? We do not have books, children's books, that reflect favorably on our communities. For African Americans, Native Americans, for Asian Americans and Latinos. We don't have those. And it's, once you look at the data, it's more extreme than you ever even imagine that it would be. So equity is really important in all of this. And so in as much as different groups are able to see their story, their story in history, in culture, in intellectual traditions, in philosophy, then those groups are better represented if you're able to see that. But to the degree that you're not, then it's a subjugated. It's a very profound subjugated knowledge. So I think it's very context based. Clearly, any group that is oppressed deserves to be represented and to not be subjugated. I don't know if anyone else wants to contribute to that question. But there's clearly an agenda coming out of Mexican American studies, and yes, there's scholarship, but inclusion and respect and dignity, eliminating all forms of oppression, and it's very oftentimes very based in race, the study of race. Not that there aren't other intersectionalities. There are. There's all kinds, and the more ways in which you are different, oftentimes the more ways in which you are challenged. But because we do live in a racist society that aligns to opportunity, it aligns to well-being, then that's important. When in the film, you may have heard me say that what we tell our children is that none of you should feel like you don't belong here. Your ancestors never left the continent, like ever, right? And yet you're treated like a stranger in your own land, right? Over there in North Dakota, similarly, you have the indigenous people there that are being regarded as trespassers on their own native land, right? This is the same pattern of colonization. If we're not decolonizing, and our whole education system is a colonial structure, right? It's profound when you look at the segregation of the children in our schools, and it's segregation by race and class. Well, that maps on perfectly to the colonizing framework that doesn't reduce the whole of the United States to a nation of immigrants, but actually considers that we were incorporated through slavery and through violence and through colonization, and how it's not simply a thing of the past, but it's an everyday affair when our teachers themselves feel like they're transgressing, speaking Spanish in the hallways. That's like unbelievable. We're not in Maine, we're not in Alaska, and we share the longest border with Mexico. Ya basta. Ya basta. Now we have to change this. This is ridiculous. We need to get place-based in our understandings, and we need to correct all of this. And we cannot sustain as a country a community that is demographically massive, Latino and African American, that is uneducated. We cannot, without impacting an economy. So just out of sheer self-interest, we would ideally address ethnic studies and growing our own teachers, I would say. I think we need to combine these movements. Again, we can pass a policy, but if we do not have the curriculum, if we do not have the teachers prepared in the curriculum, what are you going to do? Give it to the coach, right? Are you going to give it to, this is what I heard in one of our states. Are you going to give it to the two African Americans in the classroom because, hey, you teach ethnic studies, the community wants it, and they're saying, I don't have any preparation in ethnic studies, but that's what's going to happen. So if we don't set ourselves up well, then we're going to have evaluations come in, and it's not going to be favorable. And it's like, well, we gave this to you and it didn't work. Well, you actually never funded it. We do have another bill, by the way, a second bill for curriculum development. This is our third filing. So maybe three's a charm. That's the way it is, by the way, in the legislature and policy. You have to be persistent. A lot of times the mistake that we make as scholars and educators is that we parachute in and we think that, oh, well, we did due diligence, right? But it's really the sustained engagement and involvement from session after session that, mobilizing the community on the one hand, providing as educators, the education, right? And educating our staff, providing the research, holding the convenings, the press conferences. It's a lot. It's very intensive, right? But once you do that, then you can over time build a constituency that's educated for change. That's what we've done in Texas around assessment. I'm so happy. I'm so happy about that. So now it's a robust opt-out movement and assessment system. But that was like a lot of work that went into that. And that's how you make change, right? It's not going to be overnight. There's no, I'm sorry, there is no silver bullet. I wish if there were, I would just love to have one. But it's relational, it's relationships, and through relationships, you're able to effectuate just all the change that we seek. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, I guess. There's two here, two people.
Thank you, Angela, for your presentation. It was fascinating. It's wonderful to see a program which actually fights the cultural alienation and exclusion that kids are feeling in these schools. And I think that's a very important first step towards raising achievement. I know as a former ESL teacher that the maintenance of first language and the development of first language literacy is actually a really important thing, not just in itself, but also in terms of developing second language literacy. We used to teach a lot of kids who were illiterate or pre-literate in their own language, and obviously building that literacy is a really important way to increasing achievement. This is kind of leading to a question regarding how your movement uses research evidence and evidence from things like educational achievement to actually promote your cause, and whether you think politically that's actually something that helps you or not. I mean, to be able to say, look, what we're actually doing here is improving achievement, improving educational outcomes for all kids, raising literacy standards. It's a different kind of argument, but I wonder if politically it's a useful argument and one which actually would help you.
Yeah, thank you. Of course. So I've shared the research with our district people. I've testified at the State Board of Education on this. The jury is in, that's what I say, the jury is in on ethnic studies and its beneficial impacts in terms of the indicators that we care about, academic achievement, school attendance. It promotes a sense of belonging. Francesca Lopez work is a part of that. It provides that sense of connection to the curriculum because they feel included. Finally, their story matters. It's there. I think because we speak to those discourses, what we sometimes lose sight of is actually not that discourse. We do speak a lot to that, but it's community empowerment, and that scares people because then you start getting subversive, right? And I mean, I can say it here, right? I mean, I can say that we're totally about being subversive and subverting the status quo, and so we're already envisioning ways in which we're going to be able to even just transform higher education, because once you start building a constituency for higher education, then they're going to have an opinion. They're going to have a voice. I mean, maybe they're going to say things like, well, actually, can you hire more teachers for your program, because we've got this demand in the state of Texas. Can we maybe testify, work with your lobby in the legislature to bring more money into education? The problem is that our higher education universities have not really been responsive to our local communities, and so they don't have a constituency, primarily because they don't want us to have a constituency as members of the faculty. We're then viewed as sometimes as troublemakers, or as I don't know. It's just it positions for those of you that are, some of you can possibly relate, that are active and have a voice. It positions you in interesting ways that make you a threat, as if you're about, you know, doing something that's not productive. When really what we're ultimately advocating for is quality education. I mean, that's what we want, and that's what our communities want. But because it's inflected by issues of race and community empowerment, I don't know that it's wanted. I don't know that is wanted, right? I mean, what's so extreme about ethnic studies? What's so extreme about it? What's so extreme about bilingual education? You know, what's so extreme about culturally relevant curriculum? Well, maybe it's that it involves raising and elevating the stories of those communities that we do not want to feel a sense of power in themselves. We collectively, we the universities, we the state of Wisconsin, we the state of Texas. Because then that threatens your incumbency. Well, what did Arizona do, right? Well, they banned it, right? Because you had these voices that were raised, these silent voices that now are raised and that are you know, very articulate with you know, clearly defined goals, means, and ends, not only for themselves as individuals, but as a community. Well, that threatens the status quo. That threatens the incumbency of those in power. But that's such a narrow way to think about power, because I mean, the idea here is really to benefit everyone. And white children benefit, and they are never hurt. Anglo children not only benefit, but from Arizona, they are reported as having equally felt disserved by the educational system, in that the full story of Arizona was never taught to them. And my students at UT, they take my courses and they say, why is it now? Why is this the first time that I am getting this literature, this scholarship? Probably that's to a person in this room the experience. Well, why? You know, what's so amazing and dangerous about this knowledge, right?
One more question.
I think she had her hand up. And did you still have a question?
Yeah, if I can choke it out here.
Okay, great.
Within the Texas Latino community, there's a lot of intragroup diversity, and I was wondering, within the community, how do they come to see themselves as a single community, with a single identity community, so that they can promote this perspective in this curriculum?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll go back to relationships. I'll go back to, we have a long history. It's not only Texas, it's national. That's what's really exciting. This is really exciting about this. So we know each other across our states, across our universities. And it has to do, again, I'll go back to Mexican American Studies. We have our national conferences. We have our, because you are a subaltern group, you have to elaborate institutions. And that's what our elders have taught us and modeled, is that in order to have voice, we have to build institutions, right? We have to, through which we can have voice that can be vehicles for change. And so I think at the university we get that. We form our institutions that, conferences, right? Conferences, annual conferences. So we have the National Association for Chicana and Chicano Studies. In Texas, we have the NOX Tejas Foco, which is, you have the National Association for Chicano Studies, but all of them, we're divided according to regions. And so the NOX region is what's leading this fight against ethnic studies. And so it really represents, it's a very inclusive community. I think the Latino community, because it's so incredibly diverse, right? I mean, you have to come together on things that you align to, and what the community is really aligned to is really any time that your dignity is shred. I mean, this textbook, it described Mexicans as lazy, and I mean, lazy? I mean, we work so hard. We work so incredibly hard, and we're lazy, and that we're a threat to the U.S. government because we're these radicals. I mean, I mean, we're not, you know, we're not blowing up buildings. We're not, we don't have a history of doing that, right? I mean, the people coming across the border, well, you know, they're not destructive either. They want jobs. That's what people want, and dignity. I mean, treat us right. Respect is so basic, and so that really unites us. Is when our respect, right, as a community, our dignity, is trampled on. It's amazing. It seems so simple, yet so elusive. So those of us who do community organizing, you have to do the work, right? And it's granular, it's relational, it's, you know, it's a project-based movement building, but in the process, you wait for those moments that can coalesce an agenda, right? And that's the good thing about racism, is that it creates opportunity. And I always say we always need a few good racists. Right now, this election is over the top, okay? What's going on right now, but that's what we've always done. I mean, you have to be intentional about that, and so whenever there's stuff on campus, and that becomes an opportunity. I mean, you're not just a victim, right? But you should actually be working together to leverage opportunities in the wake of these problems, and not just the students, but all of us together.
We are out of time.
Yes, thank you.
So much.
Thank you so much.